Today is Tuesday, May the 27th. This is the first time we've ever recorded live, so very exciting for us, and thank you for joining us. Now, of course, I have with me Joanne and Jon Willing. Many of you will remember from the original Municipal Panel on CBC Radio many years ago, and Joanne, originally from CBC News and now working for Strategy Corps. Jon, originally from the Ottawa Citizen and now working for Algonquin College. So welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Hello.
Okay. Now, today we only have 30 minutes, and we have a very hard time getting through this in 30 minutes.
We have never done it one time. Every time we say, we're going to do it 30 minutes, and this is not, it's my fault, actually.
But the peering eyes will force us to get to 30.
Yeah.
I see it.
We did ask for your questions. Now, normally what we do is we look at what's happened at City Hall over the last week, and we typically talk about that. But this time we're making have a different route. We asked for your questions. We got 38 different responses about topics that we could discuss. We're not going to get through all of those, but we tried to combine a number of them, and we will get through about half a dozen. And so let's jump straight in. And our first topic is an amalgamation, a question of that Erwin and Mavis asked. And it's yesterday we saw security barriers go up at City Hall. A few months back, we had council make a decision to reduce the number of committees, meaning that there's fewer opportunities for the public to delegate in front of council. And a couple of years ago, we saw the staff directory for City Hall that was up on the website disappear. So we had these three events happen. And so my question, Jon, to get us started, is City Hall unnecessarily putting a distance between itself and the public?
Well, I think about the new security features at City Hall. That's pretty significant. Now, I haven't tried them myself, but I understand you have to go through security. You have to empty your pockets, I assume, to make sure you're not carrying anything, and that's dangerous. It evokes thoughts of when I was covering City Hall, I'd go to the courthouse next door all the time to try to find search for lawsuits against the city. But there, it's like airport-style security. It's you have to take off your belt to go to the courthouse, go through security. I'm not quite sure if you have to take off your belt to go watch a council meeting.
I do not want to see any councillors taking off their belts. I just want to say right now.
But it's over time this has happened, and Joanne and I were talking before coming up to the stage here about how slowly over time you see more restrictions at City Hall. When Nathan Cirillo was killed downtown, I remember the conversation really picked up about security at City Hall, which was only blocks away. And then when the convoy happened, I think the conversation really picked up about security. The convoy was just steps away, and in many cases on the steps of City Hall too. And so I remember the bollards getting up, and I was even kind of hearkening back to the days when I first started covering City Hall in 2009 and was there fortunately for 13 years. And I felt very privileged to be able to walk in and out of the building throughout the day. And you see people come to City Hall all the time, Neil, and just kind of wander through the building and learn something about their municipal government. They weren't there to go to City Hall. They were there just to go to Confederation Park or go to the Rideau Center, but they were passing through, much like I did when I was a university student coming to Ottawa. And I walked through City Hall and learned about who was on council, because they had the big sign out in front of council chambers, or just look at an art gallery, or just take in the rotunda, or learn a bit about the architecture of the building, which is really fascinating. Yeah. So I think it's too bad that we're losing that accessibility. On the flip side, maybe that's the sign of the times. It's just the climate that we're in, that we need that kind of physical security now.
How about you, Joanne? Do you think this is a sign of the times, or do we need these security measures?
Yeah, I think it's really hard to say. I think the committee issue is different. I think that is, I'm not sure they haven't, I don't know if this council is doing enough to have that many committee meetings, and if staff are under pressure. Just want to make sure this is on. But I also think, through my work, I did work for AMO, which is the Association of Municipalities of Ontario. They have a workforce development project, and we conducted a survey of municipal employees across Ontario. It's public, you can find it online. And the threat that people working in municipal staff feel is actually real. They get really abusive emails all the time, calls. It is great that local government is the government closest to the people, but it also means the people know who the hell you are. So I bet you know who Renee Amilcar is and her predecessor at OC Transpo. But I bet you don't know, well, maybe this town you do know who the deputy minister is at the, at Transport Canada, or who the ADM is at, one of the Ontario ministries. You don't know who those people are, but these people are known. And that is one of the reasons I know that the staff directory came down, both in Ottawa and other cities, why, people do get threats. I know that the council went in camera last week when these new measures were just announced. Nobody knew they were coming. So that, I think, took some people by surprise. I don't love that, I have to confess. But at the same time, we're in there are issues with society, but part of wrapped up in the issues that are causing the threats and the bad behavior is also the fall in trust in our local governments, in all our public institutions. And turning City Hall into a fortress, I don't think is going to help that. I think, and I don't know where that line is, to be honest. I get why they want to have metal detectors. When somebody came in with a long gun to Edmonton City Hall last year, shot 6 shots off and threw in a Molotov cocktail. If I worked at City Hall, I would not be happy and feel great about going into work every day. And I think everybody would think the same thing if it was your sort of business. And so I don't know where that line is, but I think we have to have a more nuanced way of making people feel secure, of giving staff the tools to say, this is what society is like now. Just quickly, I want to say there is a course that is offered by the Clerks Association on how to de-escalate really aggressive emails and phone calls. And it is oversubscribed every time they offer it. And I'm thinking, why don't we give this to every employee? So give people the tools, but also and provide the security that you need, but also make sure there's a culture of openness, make sure people know they're welcome to come to City Hall, that there's a place for them to sit and stay. When we first started, there wasn't even Wi-Fi in the public areas.
Well, listen, I'm going to jump in and say I thought those security measures are totally unnecessary. I mean, there's sure, we can always point to something that might have happened somewhere else, but it's a dispersed space. And let's not forget that we have security around the council chamber, which makes perfect sense. But the rest of City Hall is dispersed. And certainly most of the staff are working on the second level. They could find a way to separate those two levels and keep staff insulated if that's the concern. But City Hall is meant to be a place for people. It's meant to be a welcoming place. And as soon as you put security barriers up, you lose that. And in fact, John, to your point, I was there yesterday. Just to check it out.
You have to remove your belt?
I don't think I was wearing one. So. But it was airport security.
Yeah.
And I did notice people that sort of walked up to the door and then turned around. People that were just, to your point, about just curious about what's going on in City Hall and said, it's not worth it. So I was very disappointed to see that, and I just don't think we need to move that quickly. Let's move on to our next subject, which is related, and this is about better public engagement. So Jake kindly got us started on this. And this was a question that was very popular. We had Catherine, Tone, Derek, Nancy, and Roland all ask for the panel's thoughts on public engagement that the city is doing and whether the current approach is working. So Joanne, in terms of what the city is currently doing, what's working well? What could be done better?
Yeah, I have to say that I think the city is trying. So there's the comprehensive zoning bylaw. I know, super exciting, right? I know, but yeah. So they have had a lot of different kinds of in-person engagement, online engagement. There's lots of options for people to go to. And I just want to give a shout out on Monday. There's going to be one at Ben Franklin Place in person, which I find is much easier to try to actually talk to a staffer to say, how does this work? And so I think they're trying to do that. On the other hand, I think that given those, I did go to one of the online ones, one of the early ones, and I have to say, if you didn't already know everything about planning, it was pretty hard to follow. So I do think that there could be some extra resources put into how to talk about complex subjects in a down-to-earth manner. Tied up with that and my long, what I think is an important theme of improving trust in government is, you want people to consult. They have to understand what you're talking about and what the issues are. write reports better, make things more accessible. And I have a controversial suggestion, and that is consult less, but do it better, right? Do more. And so I think to your point, sir, earlier, that the gentleman talking about public engagement, too many times it just seems like pro forma, you have to say you did it. You're not really listening. To your point, you're like, oh, I had this great idea, but nobody cared. And so I think at some point, I think the city has to say things like, here is what we're doing. We're putting a sidewalk in on the street, and if you have issues, let us know. But I think sometimes people believe that consultation is asking them permission to do things, or that the city is looking for ways to change it, and they're not looking for that. So of course they're disappointed when their views have been completely ignored and everybody's time has been wasted. So I say, city, the things that are going to be happening, just say, here is what the plan is. Let us know. And things that you really are thinking, okay, we're thinking about a new policy for how to run our city parks. Put all your effort into doing it properly. And I think that would actually give the sense to people that they're listening, right? And so don't give me just a what you heard report, but what did you hear and also implement? And at Lansdowne, I'm not a huge fan of the Lansdowne project by any stretch, but at least they said, oh, we heard that people didn't like the third tower. They took that third tower down. I'm not saying that's the perfect example, but show in some ways that you heard and you're doing something about it.
Okay, John, how about you? What is the city doing well? What could they do better on engagement?
Well, I think they're always trying to figure out ways to meet the citizen where they are, wherever that is, right? These days, it's the online world. I remember a time when the former mayor and some city bureaucrats sat around the mayor's boardroom and accepted calls from the public about the budget. And I don't think a single call came in, but they were trying their best.
That was a terrible story. So boring.
It was great for us as reporters as covering City Hall. But I mean, they were trying something. And I know the city has developed a new website, Engage Ottawa, to put out proposals and get feedback. So I see them trying. In a way, a lot of the controversies that come up when it comes to engagement are probably planning controversies, right? Land use controversies. I see Councillor Leeper shaking, going like this back there. And the city staff are working against legislative timelines, so time is a factor. But I really hope in some way we try to get out early. I hope developers or people who own property, who think about developing on property, are able to consult with their councillors, and as a team they can get out to the citizens early to talk about the proposal, maybe get that feedback early, so that when the legislative timelines kick in, there's maybe some discussion already happening. And so it takes a partnership, really.
But we also have to be earnest, right? We have to be honest, especially on the planning stuff, where you're like, yeah, I know that this really, really old planning document says it can only be 6 stories, but that's not happening. And here's what is really going to happen. So let's work within the parameters of reality to make it as good as it can be. Because I think this is what happens. Everyone is on the two ends of the argument, and we're not going to find any common ground. And that's not going to be good for anybody.
Yeah, you know what works. What I have found has worked really well in consultation is actually the councillor-led events. So, for instance, last week, Councillor Menard put on a budget.
Yes. It was really good.
Yeah, put on a budget seminar, which was an opportunity for people to come out and learn a little bit about what the budget framework looks like, and just really, more importantly, to just say their piece, right? Whether it makes it into the budget or not, it's another issue.
And staff came to that as well, right? And so it was great that everybody was there to answer questions and.
Right, but this was if it hadn't have been for the exceptional effort of Councillor Menard, this would never have happened. And as far as I know, I don't believe other councillors have.
A shout out to Councillor Leeper. I know he's having one at the end of next month. I mean, he came here in person, so I feel like
well, that's great.
Yeah. But I agree with you. I think that when both the staff and the councillor are together, and also whatever other company is involved, then you can get a better discussion.
The other thing, there was one example that was mentioned earlier of what looked like a great piece of consultation, and that was the Rural Summit and the workshops that led up to the Rural Summit. And so I just don't understand why we just can't repeat that over and over again. When what I saw was communities really being brought in, being genuinely consulted, and then being listened to and having an output that responded to those concerns. And that's what I would like to see across the whole city.
And I think, to my earlier point, we can do that if we put our consultation resources into these larger policy areas instead of pretending we're consulting on little things when we're not really doing that.
Okay, can I ask a related question, which is around how should the city best communicate with residents? So, John, you mentioned this about, social media. Is that the best way we should be communicating? What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, look, it's a popular channel, right? And we can have a discussion about what channels.
We've had so many of these discussions
on the pod,
on the
right?
podcast,
about whether
yes.
the city should be on Twitter, Blue Sky, or Facebook, what have you. But that's where a lot of people are. I'm not saying everyone. But, the website is probably the best resource really the city of Ottawa has. It's not pushing information out, although the city, to their credit, does put out a lot of information in their emails and newsletters. I get them a lot, especially on Friday afternoons, right? Right? I see a lot of, but I mean, it's one of the big art forms actually at City Hall is trying to figure out where do we meet people, where they are. Are they online? Is that where we should be providing information? And I don't really have the answer. Fax machine? No, I don't think so. But I mean, but I think you want to get out the information through as many channels as possible where people will consume that information and be more informed about their local government. And I don't have the answer, but you're trying to at least give people the information where they're going to receive it.
Yeah, I say meet people where they are, and where they are is at grocery stores. And no, seriously, when we do public engagement for a municipal client, right, at the firm that I do a little bit of work for, when we were doing the police board strategic plan for Peterborough, we went to a Pete's game. We talked to 350 people. And they're like, do you want to talk about what you want your police to do? You're like, okay. And they will actually talk to you, right? And so when I mean where the people, I mean outside of City Hall, not the town halls, because you call a meeting and, you sometimes get your usual suspects. I'm a usual suspect, I just want to say. But when you want to talk to what does other people think? Well, where are they? They're busy doing, work, living their lives. Go out there, go to sporting events, go to the grocery stores. Social media, I think there's two different things. One is, how do you just put out information? I think when you have a PSA, emergency, you put it out over all those channels. Sure, social media, but that's not a way to communicate with people, right? And so I think that is a way to say, and I know that during Lansdowne, I think the city had a booth up at the Charge games. That's a good idea. I do like the sign up for your email stuff. However, I want to point out a pet peeve, and that is those emails from the city, they have to be a little bit more honest, right? I'm sure you've had this, John, where you've covered a committee meeting and then you get the précis email of what happened at a committee and you're like, what meeting were those people at? I wasn't at that meeting. So,
well, and I would say I'll put a plug in to follow your local news outlets.
Yeah.
And I wish news outlets were following City Hall a lot more. Resourcing is obviously, I can talk to you for the next hour about resourcing and newsrooms. But I mean, it just goes to show you, if you see reporters covering City Hall in the regular, they're plugged in and they're going to give you the real deal about what happened at a committee meeting or council meeting, and not just what City Hall puts out, right?
Do you know what I find is the single best source of information about the city right now in terms of communications? And that's I got another plug for Jeff is the councillor emails.
Yes.
And not just your own councillor, but councillors across the city. They're providing by far the best information. I have to say that on this topic, I'm kind of going old school. I think this idea of trying to reach everyone on every social media platform is a waste of time. Just because the way the platforms are changing so quickly and they're so unpredictable. And what I don't want to get into this world of where, you'll have an example, for instance, that say OC Transpo will say, well, we canceled a bus and we announced it on Twitter. Well, that's just not good enough. I think we've got some specialized apps, that on the phone that work really well. So for instance, with transit, there is the transit app. I would like to see
the green one. The little green one?
Yeah,
I
that's
love
right.
That one.
Yeah. So I'd like to see all communications about transit be consolidated there. And, really, and there's a new app with emergency notifications that some of you might have seen. I signed up for that, although that is really just getting going. So I like I say, I'm kind of old school on this. I would like to.
I don't think that apps are old school. I'm just going to say.
No. Yeah, fair enough. But to your point, Joanne, about going to events is a fantastic idea. I would like to see a lot more city originated emails that come to us that are comprehensive, that really, and don't. The problem is that to your point, there's a lot of spin in them, right?
Yeah, you need a culture of wanting
Yeah.
to explain here, you know, and I think most people will understand if you explain, here is why this is complicated. Most things are complicated, and we know, you know, people know how to explain that stuff, so we should do that.
Yeah.
Oh, you brought the bell with
I
you?
brought.
Oh my God.
Okay, you know what that
I
means?
hope you don't use this at home. Like,
It's time for the lightning round. Okay, so I'm going to start with you, Jon. And Joe, Susan, Jenny, and Bessie all asked us to talk about public washrooms.
Oh.
So, Jon, is the city doing enough on this? And just a reminder, lightning round, 60 seconds.
Well, I know that they were talking about it for the 2025 budget to put in 2 self-cleaning washrooms, right? I think in Byron Market and Spark Street. So I think that's a good step. I want to see the results. I don't know if it's a pilot project. The city does a lot of pilot projects. I think that could be a good first step. And, you know, as a father of a small boy, you know, it's not just old people who need to use the washroom. Got to find a washroom for my child. But I know a lot of people in the community have worked hard at making their own maps too about where public washrooms are. Gotta go, right? Shout out to Gotta Go. Done
they're
a lot
awesome.
of work over the years. So until we see more washrooms, public washrooms, maybe self-cleaning washrooms, use the resources that the community are putting together.
Yeah. Joanne, actually, sort of similar question to you. Like, why does the issue of public washrooms seems to get so little airtime? I mean, I don't think it even made it into the official plan, right?
no, and I think it's 2 things, the priorities and money, and probably not in that order. Speaking of priorities, it's money. Like, do you remember, Jon, the LRT discussion? They're like, are there no washrooms at any of these stations? And then people like, oh, we'll deal with it later. I don't know. And they didn't. And then they're like, there are no washrooms here at any of the stations. And we added them in. I have to say, I've used the Tunney's Pasture one. It's fabulous. And like, we had to spend an extra $2 million because of that. And so I think there's always, like, we're always looking at, we have a skinny budget. We probably don't pay enough taxes. I know that's not really very popular idea, but like, everything's super skinny all the time. And that's the kind of thing that gets cut because it's an extra amenity. It's not an extra amenity. It's a very, very key public need that we have. And, you know, and to our point earlier at City Hall, like, the public washroom at City Hall by council is not accessible anymore. Like, that's a problem.
That's true. You have to possibly take off your belt to go to use the washroom through security. Yeah.
Yeah.
A little earlier than you might usually.
Okay, Jon, our next question. Judy asks, can and should anything be done by the city to prevent demolition by neglect? And so thinking of Bank in Somerset, that building, that old historic building that is about to fall down.
I think that's the biggest embarrassment right now for the city is Somerset House. Every time I go past there and look at those tarps flying in the breeze, I just think, like, what do we need to do to get this thing away and something new? And so I wonder at a certain point, and I know, like, the city has tried a carrot and stick approach with the landowner.
Bring the stick. Big stick.
They've been using sticks for years. And so now what are we going to do? Are we just going to live with this ugly building in a very prominent intersection? So I don't know what the answer is, but all I know is, and we can think about, I know another in Councillor Leeper's ward, McGee House, right? Is still sitting on Wellington Street West.
He's getting a lot of airtime for
Yeah,
coming
I
in
know,
person,
it's
man. Like, yeah.
That's what you get. But I don't know what the answer is, but I know maybe there's folks in the audience who are sick of seeing that eyesore at Bank in Somerset, and I don't know what the answer is, but the city and the landowner really have to find a way to. Personally, I'm raise it. I know it's not popular,
Yeah.
and you're going to say, well, you'll let the developer win.
Yeah.
But the alternative,
But the other
we're
alternative
gonna have
is,
a bad
okay,
building there
okay,
for a
but-
long time.
Yeah. Well, not because it's actually falling
gonna fall
apart.
apart.
So, so I found out recently that there had been a private suggestion in a former administration here to buy Somerset House, turn the ground floor into a mini library because the main library at Metcalfe and Laurier is going to be shut down when the new fabulous looking central library opens, and also have in the upper floors social services. And when you look at what's happening in Centertown now with the closures of the consumption sites, don't tell me that would have not been a great investment. But the problem is that at the time, the mayor in charge and other people thought, well, no, we're not in the business of buying buildings. And I understand this view. That is, you don't want to encourage the owners of these buildings to let them be neglectful, to let them fall apart, hoping that the city's going to buy them. But at some point, you have to do something. And like this is like a few years ago, 3 or 4 years ago. So, I mean, like that had been going on a long time, right? And so we decide to do nothing, and we're going to lose it. So I think that I would say use every single power that the city has to fix things to the nth degree, and then take them to court to get the money back. I think we do a bit of it. I don't think we push it. I don't think we push the envelope as much as we could. That is what I would like to see.
Okay. We're coming to the end of our time here. I've got one last question for each of you, and it is, and I'll start with you, Jon. What do you think is the most important issue that is coming down the road for the city?
I don't know if it's the most important, but I've written a lot about the Byward market in my time as a City Hall reporter. It seemed like it was something that people wanted to read a lot about. And so when I look at the Byward market, I think that's going to be just an area of the city that's going to receive a lot of attention, especially since we're moving to the 200th anniversary of the Byward market and Byward. And I think the city is really has its mind focused on doing something special. And now, it's not in great shape, right? The Byward market. I just read a story in the Globe and Mail on the weekend that talked about fentanyl damaged downtown communities. And it likened the Byward market in Ottawa like the situation that I guess is happening in Victoria right now. So I think there's going to be some added attention, especially with this big celebration coming up from the city and maybe council about what to do with the Byward market.
Yeah. Joanne, your top issue?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of two things, because I think the biggest issue will be Lansdowne because the finances come this fall, so controversial, big. But in some ways, I think the most important thing is the long-term financial plan is coming. So boring, right? But the boring stuff is the important stuff at City Hall. And it is, what kind of financial shape is our city in? We really don't know. And that's another thing. I worked on the Toronto long-term financial plan with my firm a little bit. I wasn't the main author of it, but I did work on it, and it led to a new deal for the city of Toronto. So our existing one is from 2017, our capital one. And so I want to know, what are all the things we have that we have planned? What have we, do we have the finances for them? And how short are we? Because we're going to be very short. And so I'm interested to see that, because I think we have to make some major changes in how we finance our city.
Yeah, no, I actually agree with that. I think that's
We're agreeing, Neil? This seems wrong.
First, this is the most important issue coming down the road is the fact that we're facing these massive deficits on infrastructure spending, just in terms of renewing the infrastructure that's already out there. So in terms of what they call other, so everything other than roads and sewers. So in other words, fire stations and civics and arenas. I think the deficit was $3 billion that we haven't figured out how we're going to pay for that. And then I think it's another $2 billion on roads roughly. So we're talking about $5 billion that we haven't figured out how to finance yet. So that's going to be a bit traumatic, to say the least. Yeah. Okay. Well,
on that happy note.
Yeah. So that has been the Municipal Panel. I want to thank everyone here. Thank you for all your questions. And I have one last short question, and that is, we are the Municipal Panel. What do you think about the Municipal Panel? Get it? Should we do it? Should we change the name? No? Oh, wow. No. I get a one yes. Yeah, we got a yes. Okay, listen. Thanks again. You've been a great audience. We will be back in a week, and we'll look forward to reconnecting then. Thanks. Bye-bye.